The city of Halcyon had seen better days. Once hailed as a bastion of progress, its police department now stood as a symbol of systemic failure. Headlines screamed of corruption, protests filled the streets, and the public demanded reform. Change was coming, though few within the department knew just how profoundly. Officer James Carter adjusted his collar as he stepped into the precinct. At 29, he carried the bravado of youth with the weariness of someone who had seen too much, too soon. The badge on his chest gleamed, but beneath it, doubt festered. Public scrutiny had turned the department into a pressure cooker, and Carter found himself caught between loyalty to his colleagues and the nagging voice of his conscience. "Morning, Carter," Officer Maria Gonzalez greeted, her voice brisk as always. Gonzalez had been on the force for over a decade, her sharp instincts matched only by her sharper tongue. Despite their differences, she and Carter made a formidable team. "Morning," Carter replied, glancing at the clock. Roll call was in 10 minutes, and rumors were already circulating about the new chief's arrival. A stranger to Halcyon, the incoming chief was said to be a reformer, a stickler for justice who took no prisoners. "Think the new boss will last a month?" Carter joked, grabbing a coffee. Gonzalez smirked. "Depends on how many toes they step on." "You nervous?" "Why would I be?" "Because you don't like change," she said, sipping her coffee. "And something tells me this one's going to turn this place upside down." Carter shrugged, feigning indifference, but the truth was he was nervous. The department's old guard was crumbling, and he wasn't sure where he fit in the emerging order. Still, he pushed the thought aside. Today was just another day on the job. Across town, Dr. Angela Hartfield navigated the streets of Halcyon in a modest sedan. Her hands rested lightly on the wheel as she took in the city she'd soon oversee. The skyline was dotted with cranes, a testament to Halcyon's attempt to rebuild. Yet, beneath the surface, Angela knew the rot ran deep. Angela was no stranger to challenges. As a black woman in law enforcement, she had spent her career shattering ceilings and dismantling barriers. Her appointment as chief of police was both a victory and a burden, a chance to make history and a target on her back. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A quick glance revealed a text from her aide, *ED 20 minutes. "They're expecting you at the precinct*. Angela smiled faintly. They weren't expecting her at all, not really. The department's culture was an open secret, and Angela had no illusions about the uphill battle ahead. But she'd faced worse. The sound of a siren jolted her from her thoughts. Angela glanced in her rearview mirror and saw the flashing lights of a patrol car. She frowned, easing the car to the curb. A routine stop, perhaps, but the irony was not lost on her. Carter stepped out of the patrol car, his hand resting on his holster as he approached the driver's side. Gonzalez followed, her expression neutral but alert. The vehicle's windows were tinted, and Carter felt the familiar adrenaline surge of uncertainty. The driver's window rolled down to reveal a calm, composed black woman. She wore no makeup, her natural curls framing a face that radiated quiet authority. Her gaze met Carter's without a flicker of fear. "License and registration, ma'am," Carter said, his tone professional but clipped. The woman complied, her movements deliberate. As she handed over her documents, she asked, "Is there a problem, officer?" "You were driving a few miles over the limit," Carter replied. It was a minor infraction, hardly worth a stop, but he didn't back down. Something about her demeanor unsettled him. Gonzalez cleared her throat. "I'll run the plates," she said, retreating to the patrol car. Angela's lips curved into a faint smile. "Interesting day for a stop," she said, her voice steady. "Do you always patrol this area?" Carter frowned. "Ma'am, we're asking the questions here." Before Angela could respond, Gonzalez returned, her expression unreadable. She whispered something to Carter, who stiffened. He handed Angela's documents back with a curt nod. "You're free to go," he said, stepping back. Angela studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Have a good day, officers," she said, driving away. As the sedan disappeared down the road, Gonzalez raised an eyebrow. Didn't recognize her, did you? Carter shot her a glare. Recognize who? Gonzalez smirked. Our new chief. Angela arrived at the precinct 10 minutes later, her stride confident as she entered the building. The lobby buzzed with activity, officers and staff bustling about. Conversations hushed as she passed, her presence commanding attention. In the briefing room, the department's leadership team stood at attention. Carter and Gonzalez were among them, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Angela stepped to the front of the room, her gaze sweeping over the assembled officers. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and steady. I'm Dr. Angela Hartfield, your new chief of police. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Carter's face turned crimson as recognition dawned. Angela's eyes flicked to him briefly, but she gave no indication of their earlier encounter. I know this department has faced challenges, Angela continued, but I believe in Halcyon. I believe in justice. And I believe we can rebuild trust, together. Her words hung in the air, a quiet challenge to everyone in the room. For Carter they landed like a stone in his chest. He shifted uncomfortably, aware that the days ahead would test him in ways he'd never imagined. The precinct's atmosphere was a blend of curiosity and caution as Angela moved through her first day. She spent the morning in back-to-back meetings, listening to division heads outline their operations and challenges. Though the faces around the table varied, the undercurrent was the same: skepticism. Angela had anticipated this. She was an outsider, a reformer sent to shake up a deeply entrenched system. Change was never welcomed easily, especially not in a department rife with traditions and egos. By mid-morning, Angela requested a precinct tour. She wanted to see the heart of the operation, the officers on the ground, the support staff, the cells where lives often changed in the blink of an eye. Gonzalez was assigned as her guide, much to Carter's chagrin. This is the bullpen, Gonzalez said, gesturing to the sea of desks cluttered with paperwork, coffee mugs, and computer monitors. The hum of phones and the murmur of conversations filled the air. Most of the day-to-day work happens here. Angela nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. She stopped at one desk where a young officer was typing furiously. Officer, Angela said, her tone polite but firm. The man looked up startled. Yes, Chief? He stammered, standing so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. What's your name? She asked. Daniels, ma'am. Officer Daniels? Nice to meet you, Officer Daniels. What are you working on? He hesitated, glancing at Gonzalez before replying. Just finishing up a report on last night's arrest. Routine disturbance call. Angela smiled faintly. Good. Keep up the work. She moved on, leaving Daniels to exhale in relief. As they continued the tour, Carter watched from across the room. He couldn't shake the weight of their earlier encounter, nor the unease of having her as his superior. She was calm, composed, and commanding. It irritated him, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Something on your mind, Carter? Gonzalez asked as she returned to her desk. She's making a show of it, Carter muttered. She's doing her job, Gonzalez corrected. And maybe if you stopped grumbling you'd learn a thing or two. The day ended with a staff briefing. Angela addressed the room once more, outlining her vision for the department. She spoke of integrity, transparency, and accountability. The words were aspirational, but to some they felt like an indictment. After the meeting, Carter lingered in the hallway, watching as Angela conversed with a small group of officers. Her laugh carried down the corridor, light but genuine. She didn't seem burdened by the tension that weighed on everyone else. She's not what you expected, is she? Gonzalez said, appearing at his side. Carter shook his head. Not at all. Give it time, Gonzalez advised. You might surprise yourself. Carter said nothing, but as he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than he'd anticipated. Angela's second day began early with a cup of black coffee and a stack of personnel files. In her temporary office, the blinds were pulled shut, casting lines of shadows across her desk. She read through each file meticulously, noting patterns: commendations given disproportionately to a select group of officers, disciplinary actions swept under the rug, and transfers that hinted at deeper tensions. At 8 o'clock sharp, her aide, Tricia, knocked on the door and handed her a tablet. "Chief, the union rep has requested a meeting. Also, Captain Norris wants to go over the upcoming community outreach event. And there's a complaint filed by Officer Carter." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Carter? Already?" Tricia nodded. "Says it's regarding yesterday's traffic stop." Angela took a deep breath, setting the tablet aside. "Let's schedule the union rep first. I'll deal with Carter later." The meeting with the union was tense but expected. Representatives voiced concerns about morale, overreach, and what they called excessive oversight. Angela listened patiently, her expression neutral. When they were finished, she leaned forward. "I understand your concerns," she said. "But let me be clear. My job is to ensure this department operates with integrity and earns back the public's trust. That means accountability. If any of you have ideas on how we can achieve that, my door is always open. But make no mistake, change is coming and it's non-negotiable." The room fell silent. One representative muttered something under their breath, but no one dared challenge her directly. As the meeting adjourned, Angela made a mental note of those who had been most resistant. Later that day, Carter was called into Angela's office. He entered with a stiff posture, his jaw set. Angela gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing. "Officer Carter," Angela began, "I understand you filed a complaint about our interaction yesterday. Would you care to elaborate?" Carter hesitated. He hadn't expected to be called out so directly. "It wasn't personal, Chief. I just think it's important for everyone to follow procedure, no matter their rank." Angela nodded slowly. "I agree. Procedure is important. But so is discretion. Do you believe I was speeding?" Carter shifted uncomfortably. "It may have been marginal." "Then let's call it a misunderstanding," Angela said evenly. "Moving forward, I expect professionalism and open communication from all my officers, yourself included. Are we clear?" Carter nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Chief." As he left her office, Carter felt a mix of frustration and grudging respect. Angela had disarmed him with her calm demeanor, but he wasn't ready to let his guard down. Not yet. Angela ended her day with a briefing on an ongoing investigation into a series of burglaries in the North District. She asked pointed questions, challenging the assumptions of the lead detective. By the time the meeting was over, it was clear she was not one to rubber-stamp decisions. Back at her desk, Angela stared out the window at the city lights. The resistance within the department was palpable, but so was the opportunity. Change would not come easy, but Angela was prepared for the fight ahead. Angela's first week as chief culminated in a department-wide town hall. Designed to open communication channels, the meeting was met with mixed reactions. Some officers saw it as a chance to voice their concerns, while others viewed it as an empty gesture. Angela, however, intended it to be a turning point. Standing at the front of the room, she began, "Today is about honesty. I want to hear your thoughts, about this department, about what's working and what's not. Change doesn't happen in isolation, and I need each of you to be part of the solution." For several moments, the room was silent. Then a veteran officer named Harris stood. "With all due respect, Chief, we've seen reformers come and go. What makes you different?" Angela's gaze was steady. "I'm not here to be different. I'm here to be effective. My focus is on results, not rhetoric. And I intend to earn your trust through actions, not words." Harris nodded slowly, sitting down. The exchange seemed to loosen the room's tension, and other hands began to rise. Officers spoke about resource shortages, morale issues and concerns about public perception. Angela listened intently, jotting notes and asking follow-up questions. When the meeting ended, she approached Harris. "Thank you for speaking up. I appreciate your candor." Harris studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. "I'll hold you to your word, Chief." Angela smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Amid the protests and internal backlash, Angela focused on building alliances within the department. She identified officers who, while silent, shared her vision of reform. Among them was Officer Maria Gonzalez, whose pragmatic approach made her an invaluable ally. One afternoon, Angela called a meeting with a small group of these officers, including Carter and Gonzalez. They gathered in the precinct's cramped conference room, the air heavy with unspoken tension. "I called you here because I need your help," Angela began, her tone earnest. "This department is at a crossroads. Change is coming whether we like it or not. The question is, will we lead that change or will it be forced upon us?" Gonzalez was the first to speak. "Chief, I'm with you. But the old guard? They're not going down without a fight." Angela nodded. "I don't expect them to. But we're not fighting them, we're fighting for something bigger. Accountability. Trust. Justice." She paused, meeting each officer's gaze. "If we stick together, we can turn this department around." Carter, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "What do you need from us?" Angela smiled faintly. "Your honesty, your courage, and your willingness to challenge the status quo. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it." The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, Carter felt a glimmer of hope that things might actually change. The tipping point came when Angela implemented a zero-tolerance policy for excessive force. The policy required immediate suspension pending investigation for any officer involved in a use-of-force complaint. It was a bold move and one that infuriated the union. Detective Ross, who had become the unofficial voice of dissent, confronted Angela during a department-wide briefing. "Chief, this policy is going to paralyze us," Ross said, his tone sharp. "Officers will hesitate in the field, and that hesitation could cost lives." Angela's response was measured. "If an officer can't perform their duties without resorting to excessive force, they shouldn't be wearing the badge. Accountability is not optional." Ross's face darkened, but he said nothing more. The room buzzed with murmurs, the divide within the department more evident than ever. That evening, Angela received an anonymous tip about a secret meeting among the old guard. They were planning to undermine her reforms by leaking sensitive information to the press. Angela knew she couldn't ignore it. She called Gonzalez and Carter into her office. "I need your help. If this information gets out, it could derail everything we've worked for." Gonzalez nodded. "What do you want us to do?" "Find out who's behind it and stop them," Angela said. "But do it by the book. We can't afford any missteps." Carter and Gonzalez began their investigation, uncovering a network of dissenters within the department. They tracked encrypted messages, reviewed suspicious activity, and slowly pieced together the conspiracy. The closer they got, the more dangerous the situation became. When Carter confronted Ross about his involvement, Ross didn't deny it. "You're either with us or against us, Carter," he said, his tone icy. "She's going to destroy everything we've built." Carter's reply was firm. "Maybe it's time to build something better." Ross was suspended pending an internal investigation. The move sent shockwaves through the department, but it also solidified Angela's authority. The tension within the department reached a breaking point, but for the first time Angela felt the tide beginning to turn. Officers who had been on the fence started to see the value in her vision. The silent majority was no longer silent. A high-profile case tested the department's resolve and Angela's leadership. A local politician's son, arrested for a hit-and-run, became the center of a media firestorm. The pressure to sweep the case under the rug was immense, with calls coming from the mayor's office and powerful connections threatening Angela's position. Angela held her ground. "Justice isn't selective," she said during a tense meeting with city officials. "We don't get to decide who the law applies to. It applies to everyone." Her refusal to bow to pressure alienated some allies but strengthened her credibility with the public and the department's younger officers. Gonzalez, who had watched the ordeal unfold, told Angela, "That was a gutsy move, Chief. Not many would have done what you did." Angela smiled faintly. "If we start compromising now, we might as well give up." Meanwhile, Carter faced a moral crossroads of his own. During a routine patrol, he discovered evidence linking a longtime colleague to a string of thefts. Reporting it would mean betraying someone he'd once considered a mentor, but not reporting it would undermine everything Angela was fighting for. After days of internal conflict, Carter made his decision. He reported the thefts, knowing the fallout would be personal and professional. When Angela called him into her office, he braced for reprimand but instead found gratitude. "You did the right thing," Angela said. "It's not easy, but it's necessary. That's what integrity looks like." Carter left her office with a newfound respect for her leadership and a clearer understanding of his own role in the department's transformation. As Angela's reforms took hold, the department saw tangible improvements. Reports of excessive force dropped, and community relations began to mend. Programs aimed at de-escalation and mental health support were implemented, spearheaded by Gonzalez and a team of progressive officers. One of the most significant changes came with the creation of a community oversight board. While controversial, the board became a cornerstone of Angela's vision for transparency. At its first public meeting, Angela faced a packed auditorium of skeptical citizens. "We're not here to defend what's been done wrong in the past," Angela said. "We're here to ensure it doesn't happen again. This board is a step toward accountability, and accountability is the foundation of trust." The speech earned a standing ovation, and even some of Angela's harshest critics began to acknowledge her determination. Inside the department, however, remnants of the old guard continued to resist. Angela received an anonymous threat, a stark reminder that not everyone was on board with the changes. Gonzalez and Carter increased security around the precinct, but Angela refused to be intimidated. "This isn't about me," she told her team. "It's about what we're building. And we're not stopping now." The incident only galvanized her supporters. Carter, who had once doubted Angela's approach, became one of her most vocal advocates. "If she's willing to put herself on the line, the least we can do is stand with her," he told Gonzalez. By the end of the year, the Halcyon Police Department had become a model of reform. Angela's leadership had turned the tide, but she knew the work was far from over. As she stood in her office overlooking the city, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. "Chief?" Gonzalez knocked on the door. "We've got the press downstairs. They want to comment on the new crime stats." Angela turned, a faint smile on her face. "Let's give them something worth reporting." Angela's resolve was put to the ultimate test when a hostage situation unfolded at a downtown bank. The perpetrator, a disgruntled ex-employee, demanded justice for perceived wrongdoings. The stakes were high, with dozens of civilians trapped inside, and the media swarmed the scene. Angela insisted on leading the negotiations herself, despite protests from senior officers. "This is what leadership looks like," she said firmly. "If I can't step up now, what message does that send?" Over the course of hours, Angela displayed an unwavering calm. She listened to the hostage-takers' grievances, empathizing without conceding. Slowly, she built a rapport, earning enough trust to convince him to release the hostages one by one. By nightfall, the final hostage was freed, and the suspect surrendered peacefully. The outcome was a triumph, lauded by both the media and the public. Angela's handling of the crisis silenced even her harshest critics within the department. Carter, who had been on the perimeter during the ordeal, approached Angela afterward. "That was incredible, Chief. I don't think anyone else could have done what you just did." Angela offered a tired but genuine smile. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us. That's what a team does." 6 months later, the Halcyon Police Department was unrecognizable. Angela's reforms had taken root, creating a culture of transparency, accountability, and collaboration. Community trust was at an all-time high, and officers took pride in the progress they had achieved together. At an awards ceremony honoring the department's transformation, Angela took the stage to a standing ovation. Her speech was heartfelt yet resolute. "We've proven that change is possible," she said. "But this is just the beginning. The work of justice is never done, and we must remain vigilant. Together we've built something worth fighting for, and together we'll keep it strong." As the applause echoed, Angela glanced at Carter and Gonzalez, who stood among the crowd. They exchanged a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. The future was far from certain, but for the first time in years, Halcyon had hope. And under Angela's leadership, hope felt like more than a fleeting dream. It felt like a promise.